The wind howled through the streets of Nashville as rain hammered mercilessly against the windows of Melody Diner, a small 24-hour restaurant located on the outskirts of the city. It was one of those March nights when Tennessee showed its wildest side, with lightning cutting through the dark sky and thunder echoing like distant drums. Sarah Mitchell wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the clock hanging above the coffee machine. 11:47 p.m. The diner was almost empty, with only old Mr. Peterson sitting in his usual corner booth, slowly sipping his third cup of black coffee while reading yesterday's newspaper for the dozenth time. At 28, Sarah had been working at Melody Diner for almost 3 years, ever since she'd moved to Nashville after her husband David's death in a car accident. The bell above the entrance door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see a figure rushing in from the storm. The woman was drenched, her red hair clinging to her face, and she clutched a small purse against her chest, as if it contained all her worldly possessions. She wore simple jeans and a plain sweater, but something about her posture suggested she was carrying more than just the weight of wet clothes. "Good evening," Sarah said with a warm smile, grabbing a clean towel from behind the counter. "Terrible night to be out, isn't it?" The woman looked up, and Sarah noticed her eyes were red. Whether from the rain or tears, she couldn't tell. "Thank you," the stranger said quietly, accepting the towel. I just needed somewhere to sit for a while." "Of course. Please, take any seat you'd like. Can I get you something hot? Coffee? Tea? Maybe some soup to warm you up?" The woman hesitated, looking down at her purse. Just coffee, please. Black." Sarah noticed the slight tremor in the woman's voice and the way she avoided eye contact. In her 3 years at the diner, she'd seen all kinds of people. Travelers, late-night workers, folks running from something or toward something else. This woman seemed to be running from something deep inside herself. "Coming right up," Sarah said, moving toward the coffee machine. As she prepared the brew, she kept glancing at her customer, who had chosen a booth in the far corner, away from the windows. The woman stared at her hands, occasionally looking up at the storm raging outside. Sarah brought the coffee over, setting it down gently. "Here you go, fresh and hot." "Thank you," the woman said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I'm Rebecca, by the way." "Sarah. Nice to meet you, Rebecca." Sarah lingered for a moment, studying the woman's face. There was something familiar about her features, but she couldn't place where she might have seen her before. "Are you from around here?" Rebecca shook her head slightly. "Not exactly. I'm having a difficult night. Sometimes you just need to be somewhere that feels safe, you know?" Sarah's heart went out to her. She'd had plenty of those nights herself, especially in the months after David's death, when even her own home didn't feel like a refuge. "I understand completely. You take all the time you need. The storm should pass soon." As Sarah returned to her duties, she found herself stealing glances at Rebecca. The woman sat motionless, occasionally taking small sips of her coffee, but mostly just staring into the dark liquid, as if it held answers to questions she couldn't voice. Around midnight, the last customer besides Rebecca, Mr. Peterson, left, tipping his hat to Sarah as he headed out into the slightly calmer night. The diner fell into a comfortable quiet, broken only by the steady patter of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Sarah busied herself wiping down tables and refilling condiment containers, but her attention kept returning to her solitary customer. "Sarah?" Rebecca's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Yes? Do you mind if I ask, how do you do it? Keep smiling, I mean. Even on nights like this, when everything feels heavy," Sarah finished, setting down her cleaning cloth and walking over to Rebecca's booth. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" Rebecca gestured to the seat across from her, and Sarah slid into the vinyl booth. "I lost my husband 2 years ago," Sarah began, her voice steady but gentle. "Car accident. For months afterward, I thought I'd never feel light again. But then I realized something. Sometimes the only way to keep going is to be the light for someone else. Even if it's just serving coffee with a smile or listening to someone who needs to talk." Rebecca looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time. "I'm sorry about your husband." "Thank you. And I'm sorry about whatever's weighing on you tonight." For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Then Rebecca spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes, success isn't what you thought it would be. Sometimes you reach the top of the mountain only to realize you're still the same person with the same problems, just with a better view of how alone you really are. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. But you're not alone right now. And sometimes that's enough to get you through to tomorrow. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. I should probably go. I've taken up enough of your time. Nonsense. Your coffee's barely touched, and the storm's still pretty fierce out there. Sarah glanced toward the kitchen, where she could see a fresh apple pie cooling on the counter. Tell you what, when was the last time you had a proper meal? I can't really afford. Sarah waved her off. Who said anything about affording? It's almost closing time, and that pie's just going to sit there otherwise. How about a slice with some vanilla ice cream? On the house. Rebecca started to protest, but Sarah was already up and moving toward the kitchen. I insist. Sometimes we all need someone to take care of us, even if we're not used to asking for it. As Sarah cut a generous slice of pie and added a scoop of ice cream, she thought about her own struggles as a single mother. Her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was staying with Sarah's mother tonight, as she did whenever Sarah worked the late shift. Money was always tight, but Sarah believed in karma, that kindness given freely would somehow find its way back when you needed it most. She returned with the pie and sat down across from Rebecca again. There. That should help chase away some of the storm clouds. Rebecca took a bite and closed her eyes, a small smile crossing her face for the first time that evening. This is incredible. Did you make it? The day cook Maria made it. She's been here 15 years and has magic hands when it comes to desserts. Sarah watched Rebecca eat, noting how she seemed to savor each bite as if it were a small miracle. Sarah, Rebecca said after a few minutes, I want you to know that your kindness tonight, it means more than you could possibly understand. There aren't many people in this world who would sit with a stranger and offer comfort without expecting anything in return. Everyone deserves compassion, Rebecca. We're all fighting battles that others can't see. They talked quietly for another hour, sharing stories carefully. Sarah about her daughter and dreams of maybe opening her own small restaurant someday. Rebecca about feeling lost despite outward success, though she remained vague about the specifics of her life. The storm gradually subsided to a gentle rain, and the clock crept toward 2 a.m. I should really let you close up, Rebecca said finally, reaching into her purse. The coffee and pie are on me, Sarah insisted, but I'll take $1 for the tip jar if it makes you feel better. Rebecca pulled out a $20 bill. This is for your daughter. Buy her something special and tell her it's from someone who believes her mother is an angel. Rebecca, I can't take this much. Please. It would mean a lot to me to know I could give back just a little of what you've given me tonight. Sarah accepted the money, touched by the gesture. Thank you. Emma will be thrilled. She's been wanting this art set she saw at the store. Rebecca gathered her things and headed toward the door. At the entrance, she turned back. Sarah? Yes? Never stop being who you are. The world needs more people like you. And with that, Rebecca disappeared into the gentle rain, leaving Sarah with a warm feeling in her chest and the distinct impression that she'd just encountered someone truly special, even if she couldn't quite put her finger on why. As Sarah finished her closing duties, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night had been different somehow. Important. She carefully tucked the $20 bill into her purse, already picturing Emma's face when she brought home that art set. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh with the promise of a new day. Sarah locked up the diner and headed home, unaware that her simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. 3 days later, Sarah was working the morning shift at Melody Diner, humming softly as she refilled the napkin dispensers. The breakfast rush had been busier than usual, and she was grateful for the steady tips that would help with this month's rent. Emma had been over the moon about the new art set, spending hours creating colorful drawings that now decorated their small apartment's refrigerator. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see her manager, Frank Morrison, walking in with his usual stern expression. At 45, Frank had been managing the diner for nearly a decade, and his approach to business was strictly by the book. He was a thin man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, especially when it came to the restaurant's bottom line. "Sarah, I need to speak with you," Frank said, his tone clipped and professional. "Office, now." Sarah's stomach dropped. In her 3 years at the diner, she'd rarely been called to Frank's cramped office behind the kitchen, except for her annual reviews. She followed him past the grill where Maria was flipping pancakes, catching the older woman's concerned glance. Frank's office was barely large enough for a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. The walls were covered with schedules, supply invoices, and health department certificates. Frank closed the door and sat behind his desk, gesturing for Sarah to take the chair across from him. "Sarah, I've been reviewing the receipts from Tuesday night's late shift," Frank began, pulling out a folder. "There's a discrepancy I need you to explain." Sarah's mind raced back to Tuesday night, to Rebecca and the storm. "What kind of discrepancy?" "A slice of apple pie and coffee that were served but not paid for. The register shows no transaction, and there's no void or comp slip." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You gave away food without authorization." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "Frank, I can explain. There was a woman who came in during that terrible storm. She was clearly having a difficult time, and I thought..." "You thought what? That you could just give away our inventory because you felt sorry for someone?" Frank's voice rose slightly. "Sarah, we've been over this before. Every item that leaves this kitchen must be accounted for. We're not a charity." "I know the rules, Frank, but this was different." She was genuinely in distress, and it was just 1 slice of pie and a cup of coffee. The pie would have gone stale anyway. "That's not the point." Frank slammed his hand on the desk, making Sarah jump. "The point is that you made an executive decision that wasn't yours to make. You gave away merchandise without permission, and then you tried to hide it by not recording the transaction." Sarah's heart was pounding. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just wanted to help someone who needed it." Frank leaned back in his chair, studying her with cold eyes. "Sarah, you've been a good employee. Reliable, punctual, generally follows the rules. But this is a serious violation of company policy. I have to consider the precedent this sets. If I let you slide, what's to stop every employee from giving away food to anyone they deem needy? Frank, please. It was a one-time thing. I've never done anything like this before, and I won't do it again. I can pay for the pie and coffee myself if that's what it takes." "It's too late for that, Sarah. The damage is done." Frank opened the folder and pulled out a pink slip. "I'm sorry, but I have to let you go, effective immediately." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You're firing me? Over a $3 slice of pie? I'm firing you for theft and insubordination. You stole merchandise and then attempted to conceal your actions." Frank's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Frank, please reconsider. I need this job. Emma and I depend on my income here. I made a mistake, but surely it doesn't warrant termination. My decision is final. Please collect your personal belongings and turn in your uniform and apron. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you." Sarah sat in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process what was happening. 3 years of loyal service, countless overtime shifts, perfect attendance, all thrown away because she'd shown kindness to a stranger in need. "This isn't right, Frank," she said quietly, standing up from her chair. "What I did came from the heart. That woman needed help, and I provided it. If that's a fireable offense, then maybe this isn't the kind of place I want to work anyway." Frank's expression didn't change. "Clean out your locker and leave your keys with Maria on your way out." Sarah walked out of the office on shaky legs. The diner's normal morning bustle seemed muted, as if she were viewing everything through a fog. Maria looked up from the grill, concern etched on her weathered face. "¿Qué pasó, mija?" Maria asked, abandoning her station to approach Sarah. "I've been fired," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "Over the pie I gave away Tuesday night." Maria's eyes flashed with anger. "That man has no heart, no soul. You are a good person, Sarah. Too good for this place." Sarah hugged Maria, the older woman's warm embrace providing some comfort in the face of disaster. "Take care of yourself, Maria. Don't let him break your spirit, too." Sarah made her way to the employee break room and opened her locker with trembling hands. 3 years of accumulated belongings, a spare sweater, some personal photos, hand lotion, a small plant Emma had given her for Mother's Day. She packed everything into a grocery bag, changed out of her uniform, and left it folded neatly in the locker. As she walked through the diner for the last time, she thought about Rebecca, wondering if the woman had any idea what her simple request for coffee had cost. Not that Sarah blamed her. The fault lay squarely with Frank's rigid policies and complete lack of human compassion. The bright morning sun felt harsh against her tear-stained cheeks as Sarah walked to her car. She sat behind the wheel for several minutes, trying to figure out how she would explain this to Emma, how she would pay next month's rent, how she would find another job without a reference from her most recent employer. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's work today, honey?" Sarah stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I'll call you later, Mom. Love you." She couldn't bring herself to deliver the news via text message. This was the kind of conversation that required a human voice, the comfort of shared worry and brainstormed solutions. As Sarah drove home, she passed a billboard advertising a Reba McEntire concert at the Grand Ole Opry the following month. For a brief moment, she wondered what it would be like to be so successful, so secure, that you never had to worry about where your next meal or paycheck would come from. Then she pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the immediate challenge of survival. At home, she sat at her small kitchen table and opened her laptop, beginning the demoralizing process of searching for new employment. Restaurant jobs, retail positions, anything that would provide steady income and allow her to maintain some semblance of stability for Emma. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been fired for showing exactly the kind of compassion and kindness that she would want someone to show to her own daughter if Emma were ever in need. But as she scrolled through job listings, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would never apologize for choosing kindness, even if it cost her everything. What she didn't know was that across town, a certain red-haired country music star was about to discover what had happened and would be absolutely livid about the injustice that had befallen someone who had shown her nothing but grace in her darkest hour. Reba McEntire sat in her manager's office at Big Machine Records, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at Nashville's skyline. It had been a week since that stormy night at the diner, and she still found herself thinking about Sarah, the kind waitress who had shown her such unexpected compassion when she'd needed it most. That Tuesday evening, Reba had been struggling with the aftermath of a bitter custody battle with her ex-husband over their son Shelby's summer visitation schedule. The media attention, the lawyers, the constant scrutiny of every aspect of her personal life, it had all become overwhelming. She'd driven aimlessly through Nashville's back streets, desperate to escape the pressure and find someplace where she could just be Rebecca, not Reba McEntire, the country music superstar. The Melody Diner had been a beacon in the storm, and Sarah had been an angel in an apron. No recognition, no requests for autographs or selfies, just pure human kindness offered to a stranger who clearly needed it. "Reba, are you listening?" Her manager, Tom Bradley, was looking at her with exasperation. A heavy-set man in his 50s with a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient, Tom had guided Reba's career for over 15 years. "Sorry, Tom. My mind was elsewhere. What were you saying about the tour?" "The production meeting for the summer tour. We need your final approval on the staging design, and the merchandising team wants to discuss the new t-shirt concepts." Reba nodded absently, but her thoughts drifted back to Sarah's warm smile and the way she'd sat with her in that empty diner, offering comfort without judgment. She'd left that $20 bill hoping it would bring a little joy to Sarah's daughter, but she found herself wishing she could have done more. "Tom, I need you to do something for me," Reba said suddenly. "Of course. What do you need?" "I want you to find someone. A waitress named Sarah who works at a place called Melody Diner. It's on the outskirts of town near the interstate. Tom raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? Reba hesitated, unsure how to explain without going into details about her vulnerable moment. She helped me out last week when I was having a difficult time. I'd like to do something nice for her in return. What kind of something nice? I don't know yet. Maybe send her some concert tickets or flowers or... Reba paused. Just find her first. Get me her full name and contact information. Tom made a note in his ever-present leather portfolio. I'll have my assistant look into it today. The next afternoon, Tom's assistant, Jennifer Walsh, knocked on Reba's dressing room door. The singer was preparing for a photo shoot for Country Living magazine, and her hair and makeup team were putting the finishing touches on her look. "Come in," Reba called, admiring her reflection in the mirror. The styling team had gone for a classic country look, flowing waves, natural makeup, and a beautiful embroidered jacket that sparkled under the studio lights. Jennifer entered, carrying a folder. "I have the information you requested about the waitress." "Great. What did you find out?" Jennifer's expression was troubled. "Her name is Sarah Mitchell. She's 28, a single mother with an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. She was working at Melody Diner until 4 days ago." "Was working? What do you mean?" "She was fired, Miss McEntire. From what I could gather, she was terminated for giving away food to a customer without authorization." Reba's hands stilled as her stylist worked on her hair. "Giving away food to a customer?" "Yes. Apparently, it happened last Tuesday night during that big storm we had. A slice of pie and coffee, according to the manager I spoke with." The pieces clicked together in Reba's mind with shocking clarity. Tuesday night, the storm. The pie and coffee that Sarah had insisted was on the house. The kind gesture that had meant so much to her in that moment of despair had cost Sarah her job. "Oh my God," Reba whispered, standing up so abruptly that her stylist jumped back. "She was fired for helping me?" Jennifer looked confused. "I'm sorry?" Reba's mind was racing. That customer she helped, it was me. I was the one she gave the pie and coffee to, and she lost her job because of it. The magnitude of the situation hit her like a physical blow. While she had been going about her life, performing, recording, living in luxury, the woman who had shown her such kindness was facing unemployment and financial hardship because of that very kindness. "Jennifer, I need you to get me everything you can on Sarah Mitchell. Her address, phone number, information about her daughter, her financial situation, everything. And I need it today." "Of course, Miss McEntire." "May I ask what you're planning?" Reba's jaw was set with determination. "I'm going to make this right. Sarah Mitchell lost her job because she was kind to me, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let her suffer for it." Within 2 hours, Jennifer had compiled a comprehensive file on Sarah. Single mother, widowed 2 years ago when her husband David died in a car accident. Living in a modest apartment in South Nashville, struggling to make ends meet on a waitress's salary. Emma Mitchell, 8 years old, honor roll student at Cane Ridge Elementary School, whose favorite subjects were art and reading. The file also contained some troubling recent information. Sarah had been unable to find steady employment since her termination from Melody Diner. She'd had several interviews at other restaurants, but when potential employers called Melody Diner for references, Frank Morrison had not been charitable in his assessment. Reba felt a burning anger rise in her chest as she read about Sarah's situation. Here was a woman who had shown nothing but compassion and integrity, now being punished for those very qualities. "Tom," she called to her manager, who was reviewing contracts at a nearby table. "Cancel everything I have scheduled for tomorrow. Reba, you have the morning show appearance and the recording session for the new single. Reschedule them. I have something more important to do." Tom looked at her with concern. "What's going on? This isn't like you to cancel professional commitments. Someone I care about is in trouble because of something I was involved in, and I need to fix it. That's all you need to know right now." That evening, Reba sat in her sprawling Belmead mansion, looking out at her perfectly manicured grounds and reflecting on the stark contrast between her life and Sarah's. She thought about that night in the diner, how Sarah had treated her with such dignity and warmth, never once asking for anything in return. The more Reba thought about it, the more determined she became. This wasn't just about making amends for an unfortunate consequence of their meeting. This was about recognizing someone who embodied the values that Reba claimed to hold dear: kindness, integrity, putting others before yourself. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Charlie? It's Reba. I need you to set up a meeting for me tomorrow morning." "No, not a business meeting. Something personal. And Charlie? I need you to be very discreet about this. Can you meet me at my house at 8 a.m.? I'll explain everything then." Charlie Peterson had been Reba's personal attorney and trusted friend for over 20 years. If anyone could help her navigate what she was planning, it was Charlie. As Reba prepared for bed that night, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in months. The custody battle, the media scrutiny, the endless demands of her career, all of that seemed trivial compared to the opportunity to make a real difference in someone's life. Sarah Mitchell had no idea that her simple act of kindness was about to come back to her in ways she never could have imagined. And Reba was determined to ensure that this story would have a happy ending, no matter what it took. The next morning would bring revelations, decisions, and the beginning of a plan that would not only restore Sarah's faith in humanity, but would also remind Reba why she had fallen in love with country music in the first place. Its power to tell stories about real people facing real challenges with courage and grace. Charlie Peterson arrived at Reba's Belmead mansion at precisely 8 o'clock the next morning, carrying his usual leather briefcase and wearing a puzzled expression. In 20 years of representing Reba, he'd learned to expect the unexpected, but her cryptic phone call had left him genuinely curious about what she had in mind. Reba met him at the front door herself, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, a far cry from her usual polished public appearance. Her red hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and Charlie noticed she looked more determined than he'd seen her in months. "Thanks for coming on such short notice, Charlie," she said, leading him through the foyer toward her home office. "I know this is unusual, but what I'm about to ask you is important to me." They settled into comfortable leather chairs in Reba's office, which was decorated with gold records, awards, and family photos. Charlie set his briefcase on the coffee table between them and pulled out a legal pad. "All right, Reba, you've got my complete attention. What's this about?" Reba took a deep breath and began telling Charlie the entire story, about her difficult night, finding refuge at the Melody Diner, Sarah's incredible kindness, and the devastating discovery that Sarah had been fired as a direct result of helping her. Charlie listened intently, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more interested as the story unfolded. When Reba finished, he sat back in his chair, processing what he'd heard. "So this Sarah Mitchell has no idea who you really are?" Charlie asked. "None whatsoever. She knew me only as Rebecca, and she treated me with such genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. Charlie, this woman lost her job because she showed compassion to a stranger. I can't let that stand." "What are you thinking of doing?" Reba stood up and began pacing, her energy building as she outlined her thoughts. "I want to help her, but I want to do it right. Not just throw money at the problem, but actually make a meaningful difference in her life." "Okay, what does meaningful look like to you?" "First, I want to deal with that horrible manager who fired her, Frank Morrison at Melody Diner. There has to be some way to address his actions." Charlie made a note. "That's tricky. Tennessee is an at-will employment state, which means employers can terminate employees for almost any reason, including policy violations. If she did give away food without authorization..." "She did it as an act of human kindness," Reba interrupted. "There has to be something we can do. Let me look into it. What else?" "I want to help her find a better job. Not just any job, something that recognizes her talents and gives her a real future." Charlie nodded approvingly. "That's more constructive. Do you have something specific in mind?" Reba sat back down, her eyes bright with inspiration. "Actually, I do. You know how I've been talking about opening that restaurant in Music Valley? The one focused on authentic country cooking and supporting local musicians? The project that's been sitting on your desk for 2 years because you couldn't find the right person to manage it. Exactly. What if Sarah Mitchell is that person? Charlie raised an eyebrow. Reba, she's a waitress. Managing a high-profile restaurant in one of Nashville's busiest tourist areas is a completely different skill set. But she has something more important than experience, Charlie. She has heart. She understands hospitality in a way that can't be taught. And besides, we'd provide all the training and support she needs. Charlie was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. This would be a significant investment. You're talking about launching a restaurant, hiring staff, training a manager with no management experience? I'm talking about giving someone who deserves it a real opportunity. Sarah Mitchell showed me kindness when I needed it most, and she lost her job as a result. This isn't charity, Charlie. This is recognizing potential and betting on character. What about her daughter? Single mothers have additional challenges when it comes to demanding careers. Reba's smile grew wider. I've thought about that too. The restaurant will have on-site childcare for employees' children. Emma can do her homework there after school, spend time with her mom, maybe even help out with small tasks as she gets older. It'll be a family-friendly work environment. Charlie was beginning to see the scope of Reba's vision. You're not just talking about helping one person, are you? You're talking about creating a whole new business model. Why not? Country music has always been about family, community, supporting each other. This restaurant could embody those values while serving great food and showcasing local talent. Have you thought about how you're going to approach Sarah with this? It's going to seem pretty overwhelming and, frankly, unbelievable. Reba paused, recognizing the challenge Charlie had identified. I've been thinking about that. I can't just show up at her door and offer her a restaurant to manage. She'd think I was crazy, or worse, that it was some kind of joke. So, what's your approach? I want to start smaller, more personal. I want to go back to the diner first. Charlie looked confused. The diner where she was fired? I want to confront Frank Morrison directly. I want him to understand exactly who he fired and why, and I want to give him a chance to make things right before I take this any further. Reba, that could backfire spectacularly. If Morrison realizes who you are, this story could end up in the tabloids within hours. Let it. I'm tired of hiding from the media, and I'm certainly not going to let fear of publicity stop me from doing the right thing. Charlie made several more notes, then looked up at his client and friend. You're absolutely certain about this? Once you start down this path, there's no going back. Sarah Mitchell's life will change forever, and so will yours. Reba thought about Sarah's warm smile, the way she'd sat with her during the storm, the genuine care she'd shown a complete stranger. She thought about Emma, a little girl whose mother's kindness had cost them their financial stability. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Charlie. Draw up the papers for the restaurant project. I want everything ready to move forward as soon as possible. And the confrontation with Morrison? I'm going there this afternoon, alone. Absolutely not. If you're determined to do this, I'm coming with you. You'll need a witness, and you'll need someone thinking clearly if things get complicated. Reba considered this and nodded. All right, but Charlie, I want you to understand something. This isn't about publicity or looking good for the media. This is about justice. Sarah Mitchell deserves better than what she got, and I'm in a position to make sure she gets it. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. It's going to be expensive, complicated, and probably exhausting, but it's right. They spent the next 2 hours working out the details of Reba's plan. Charlie would begin the legal paperwork for the restaurant project, while Reba prepared for her confrontation with Frank Morrison. They would meet at 2 o'clock to drive to Melody Diner together. As Charlie gathered his papers to leave, he paused at the door. Reba, can I ask you something personal? Of course. In all the years I've known you, I've seen you be generous with charities, supportive of other artists, kind to your fans. But this is different. This feels personal, in a way that goes beyond gratitude for Sarah's kindness. What's really driving this? Reba was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. You know what my career has been built on, Charlie? Songs about real people facing real problems. Heartbreak, loss, struggle, triumph. But somewhere along the way, I started to lose touch with that reality. The mansions, the private jets, the handlers, they create a bubble that separates you from the very experiences that make the music authentic. She gestured toward the window, where her manicured ground stretched toward the horizon. That night at the diner, Sarah reminded me what real kindness looks like. Not calculated, not for show, not expecting anything in return. Just pure human compassion. If I can't honor that and fight for someone who embodies it, then what's the point of all this success? Charlie smiled, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're not just helping Sarah Mitchell. You're trying to reconnect with the person you were before all the fame. Maybe I am, and maybe that's exactly what I need to do. After Charlie left, Reba spent the morning making phone calls and reviewing the preliminary plans for her restaurant concept. She spoke with contractors, restaurant consultants, and potential investors, laying the groundwork for what would become a significant business venture. But underneath all the practical considerations was a burning desire to right the wrong that had been done to Sarah Mitchell. At 2 o'clock sharp, Charlie returned with his sedan, and they drove across Nashville toward the Melody Diner. The afternoon traffic was light, and they made good time through the city's sprawling suburbs toward the interstate where the small restaurant sat like a forgotten relic of simpler times. "Remember," Charlie said as they pulled into the diner's parking lot, "let me handle the legal aspects if they come up. You focus on making your point about Sarah." Reba nodded, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the humble establishment where her life had intersected with Sarah's just over a week ago. The neon sign flickered intermittently, and the parking lot was cracked and weed-strewn. But she remembered the warmth that had greeted her inside during that stormy night. The lunch crowd was thinning out as they entered, and Reba immediately noticed the difference in atmosphere. The staff seemed harried and unhappy, moving with the mechanical efficiency of people who were just going through the motions. She didn't see Maria behind the grill, and the new waitress who approached their table looked stressed and overwhelmed. "Can I get you folks something to drink?" the young woman asked, not making eye contact. "Actually, we'd like to speak with the manager," Charlie said politely. "Frank Morrison." The waitress's expression tightened. "Is there a problem with your service?" "No, nothing like that. We just need a few minutes of his time." The waitress disappeared toward the back of the restaurant, and within minutes, Frank Morrison emerged from his office. He was exactly as Sarah had described him in Reba's imagination. Thin, sharp-eyed, and carrying himself with the self-important air of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. "I'm Frank Morrison, the manager. Is there some kind of problem?" Reba studied his face carefully, remembering Sarah's description of the man who had fired her for an act of kindness. "Mr. Morrison, my name is Rebecca, and I'd like to ask you about a former employee of yours, Sarah Mitchell." Frank's expression immediately became guarded. "I don't discuss personnel matters with customers. If you're friends of hers, I suggest you direct your questions to her." "Actually," Reba said, standing up slowly, "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. You see, I was the customer Sarah helped the night she was fired." Frank's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what she told you, but she violated company policy by giving away merchandise without authorization. The termination was justified." Charlie pulled out his business card and handed it to Frank. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation in your office, Mr. Morrison. I think you'll find what my client has to say very interesting." Frank glanced at the business card, and his face paled slightly as he read Charlie's credentials as a prominent Nashville attorney. "Your client?" Reba pulled off the baseball cap she'd been wearing and shook out her distinctive red hair. Several customers in nearby booths began to whisper and point, recognition dawning on their faces. "Mr. Morrison," she said clearly, "I'm Reba McEntire, and Sarah Mitchell was fired because she showed kindness to me during one of the worst nights of my life." Frank's mouth fell open, and he looked around nervously as more customers began to take notice of the country music superstar standing in his modest diner. I don't understand. It's quite simple, Reba continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Last Tuesday night, during the storm, I came into your establishment in distress. Sarah served me coffee and pie, and she refused to let me pay because she could see I was having a difficult time. That simple act of human decency apparently violates your policies. Frank stammered. If I had known, Miss McEntire, please understand, we have procedures. Your procedures, Reba interrupted, her voice rising slightly, led you to fire one of the most compassionate, professional employees you're ever likely to have. Sarah Mitchell lost her job because she treated a customer with kindness and dignity. Charlie stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. Frank nodded quickly, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. Yes, of course. Please follow me. As they walked toward the office, Reba could hear the excited whispers of customers behind them. She knew that by tomorrow, the story would be all over social media and the entertainment news websites. But she didn't care. Some things were more important than controlling her public image. Frank's office seemed even smaller with 3 people in it, and the manager was visibly nervous as he closed the door behind them. His hands shook slightly as he gestured for them to sit down. Miss McEntire, I had no idea you were the customer in question. If I had known. If you had known what? You would have made an exception to your precious policies. Reba's tone was sharp. Mr. Morrison, the identity of the customer shouldn't matter. What matters is that you punished an employee for showing basic human compassion. Charlie pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Mr. Morrison, we've done some research into Sarah Mitchell's employment record here. 3 years of perfect attendance, excellent customer reviews, no previous disciplinary actions. She was terminated for a single incident involving less than $5 in merchandise. It's not about the money, Frank protested weakly. It's about following procedures, maintaining order. No, Reba said firmly. It's about power. You had the power to show mercy, to recognize that Sarah's actions came from a good heart, and instead, you chose to make an example of her. Frank was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of his situation. A country music superstar and her attorney were sitting in his cramped office, challenging his decision to fire Sarah Mitchell. The implications for his career, for the diner's reputation, were beginning to sink in. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. Reba leaned forward in her chair. I want you to call Sarah Mitchell and offer her job back, with an apology. And I want you to change your policies to allow employees some discretion in showing compassion to customers in need. And if I don't? Charlie smiled thinly. Mr. Morrison, by tomorrow morning, this story will be national news. A beloved country music star's act of kindness led to a hard-working single mother losing her job. How do you think that will play with the public, with your customers, with your corporate headquarters? Frank's face went white as he considered the potential consequences. You're threatening me. We're offering you an opportunity to do the right thing, Reba corrected. Sarah Mitchell deserves better than she got from you. This is your chance to make it right. The office fell silent, except for the hum of the ancient air conditioning unit. Frank Morrison sat behind his desk, weighing his options while Reba and Charlie waited patiently for his decision. Finally, Frank reached for his phone. I'll call her now. But as he dialed Sarah's number, none of them could have predicted what would happen next, or how this confrontation would set in motion events that would not only vindicate Sarah Mitchell, but would also launch her toward a future she never could have imagined. Sarah was sitting at her kitchen table, laptop open to job search websites, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer when she saw Melody Diner on the caller ID, but curiosity got the better of her. Hello? Sarah, this is Frank Morrison. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. After 10 days of silence, why was he calling now? Mr. Morrison. Sarah, I need to... I'm calling to offer you your job back." The words hit Sarah like a physical shock. She'd been expecting this call to be about her final paycheck or some administrative detail, not a job offer. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your job. I'm offering it back to you. Full reinstatement, no disciplinary record, and—" Frank's voice sounded strained. "An apology for my hasty decision." Sarah stood up from her chair, pacing to the window where she could see Emma playing in the apartment complex's small playground. "Mr. Morrison, I don't understand. 10 days ago, you told me I was fired for theft and insubordination." There was a long pause on Frank's end. "Sarah, the customer you helped that night, she came back today. She explained the circumstances of what happened, and I realize I may have been too harsh in my judgment." "She came back? The woman from the storm?" "Yes. And Sarah, she wanted me to make sure you knew how much your kindness meant to her." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. After days of rejection letters and failed interviews, the validation that her actions had actually mattered to someone felt overwhelming. "Mr. Morrison, I appreciate the offer, but I need some time to think about it." "Of course. But Sarah, I hope you'll consider coming back. The diner hasn't been the same without you." After hanging up, Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The mysterious Rebecca had returned to the diner and somehow convinced Frank to reverse his decision. But something about the call felt odd. Frank had sounded nervous, almost scared, which was completely unlike his usual authoritative demeanor. Her mother arrived an hour later to watch Emma, while Sarah went to a job interview at a chain restaurant across town. As she drove, Sarah found herself thinking about the offer to return to Melody Diner. Part of her wanted to accept just for the financial security, but another part of her couldn't forget the humiliation of being fired for an act of kindness. The interview went poorly. The restaurant manager seemed disinterested, and Sarah could tell he'd already made his decision before she'd even sat down. Another rejection to add to the growing pile. As she drove home, her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes, this is Sarah." "Sarah, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I work for someone who would very much like to meet with you. Someone who believes you showed her extraordinary kindness recently." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Are you talking about Rebecca, the woman from the diner?" "Yes, though I think you'll find there's more to that story than you realized. Would you be available to meet tomorrow afternoon, say, around 2 o'clock? Yes, I suppose so. Where?" Jennifer gave Sarah an address in Belle Meade, one of Nashville's most exclusive neighborhoods. After hanging up, Sarah looked up the address on her phone and was shocked to see it was a massive estate worth millions of dollars. Who was Rebecca, really? The next afternoon, Sarah drove through the winding roads of Belle Meade, feeling increasingly out of place among the mansion-lined streets. When she reached the address Jennifer had given her, she had to stop and check it twice. The estate was breathtaking. A sprawling southern mansion with perfectly manicured grounds that seemed to stretch on forever. She parked her modest sedan in the circular driveway, feeling self-conscious about its age and the small dent in the rear bumper. A woman in her 30s with a professional demeanor greeted her at the front door. "Sarah, I'm Jennifer Walsh. Thank you so much for coming." Jennifer led Sarah through a foyer that was larger than her entire apartment, past walls lined with gold records and awards. As they approached a set of double doors, Jennifer paused. "Sarah, before we go in, I want you to know that the woman you're about to meet is someone who cares very deeply about what happened to you. She's here because she believes in rewarding kindness and integrity." Jennifer opened the doors, and Sarah stepped into an elegant living room where a woman with familiar red hair stood waiting. For a moment, Sarah's brain couldn't process what she was seeing. Then recognition hit her like lightning. "Oh my God, you're Reba McEntire." Reba smiled warmly, the same gentle expression Sarah remembered from that stormy night. "Hello, Sarah. I think we have a lot to talk about." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her mind reeling. The woman she'd served pie and coffee to, the woman she'd consoled during an emotional moment. was one of the biggest country music stars in the world. I don't understand. You were Rebecca. I was someone having the worst night of my life. And you showed me kindness without knowing who I was or expecting anything in return. That's exactly who I was that night. Just Rebecca, a woman who needed help. Reba gestured to a comfortable seating area by the windows. Please, sit down. I have so much I want to say to you. Sarah moved toward the chairs on unsteady legs, still struggling to process the revelation. You could have told me who you were. And then what? You would have treated me differently, maybe asked for an autograph, been nervous about saying the wrong thing. What you gave me that night was something I rarely get. The experience of being treated like a regular person who just needed some kindness. They sat across from each other, and Reba leaned forward earnestly. Sarah, when I found out you were fired because of your kindness to me, I was furious. That's why I went to see Frank Morrison yesterday. That was you? You're the reason he called to offer me my job back? Partly, but Sarah, I didn't come here today just to talk about Melody Diner. I came here to offer you something much better. Reba spent the next hour outlining her vision for the new restaurant in Music Valley, her plans for creating a business that embodied the values of hospitality and community that Sarah had demonstrated that stormy night. I want you to manage this restaurant, Sarah. I want you to help me create something that celebrates the kind of authentic kindness you showed me. Sarah stared at Reba in disbelief. You want me to manage your restaurant? But I've never managed anything. I'm just a waitress. You're not just anything, Sarah. You have something that can't be taught. You understand what true hospitality means. You know how to make people feel welcome, valued, and cared for. Those skills are more valuable than any management degree. But I have Emma to think about. I can't take a job that would require me to work all hours. Reba smiled. That's one of the best parts of my plan. This restaurant will have on-site childcare for employees' children. Emma can do her homework there after school, help with small tasks as she gets older, be part of our extended family. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Reba was proposing. This is too much. I don't deserve... Stop right there, Reba interrupted gently but firmly. Sarah, that night in the diner you saved me. Not financially, not professionally, but emotionally. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world who act from their hearts. That's worth more than you could ever know. Jennifer, who had been quietly taking notes, pulled out a folder. Sarah, we've prepared a comprehensive employment package. Salary, benefits, training program, housing assistance if you need it. Everything you need to succeed in this role. Sarah looked at the papers Jennifer placed before her, the numbers and benefits far beyond anything she'd ever imagined for herself. But more than the financial security, what struck her was the belief these women were showing in her potential. I need to ask you something, Sarah said, looking directly at Reba. That night in the diner, you seemed so sad, so lost. Are you okay now? Reba's eyes filled with tears at the genuine concern in Sarah's voice. Even in this moment of life-changing opportunity, Sarah's first instinct was to care about others. I'm better now, thanks to you. That night reminded me why I fell in love with country music in the first place. Its power to connect people, to tell stories about real human experiences. You helped me find my way back to that. Sarah looked down at the employment contract, then back at Reba. If I do this, if I accept this incredible opportunity, I want to make sure I can live up to your expectations. Sarah, you already have. The question is, are you ready to believe in yourself the way I believe in you? 3 months later, Heartland Kitchen opened in Music Valley to rave reviews. Sarah had thrown herself into the training program with determination and grace, learning everything from inventory management to staff scheduling, while never losing the warmth and authenticity that had caught Reba's attention in the first place. On opening night, Sarah stood in the restaurant's main dining room, watching families enjoy home-cooked meals while local musicians performed on the small stage in the corner. Emma was in the childcare area, helping the other children with an art project, her face beaming with pride at being part of something special. Reba appeared beside her, surveying their creation with satisfaction. "How does it feel?" "Like a dream," Sarah said softly. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "Believe it." "And Sarah, that night you helped me taught me something important. Kindness isn't just about the moment you give it. It creates ripples that spread out in ways you never expect." Sarah looked around the restaurant filled with happy families, at the employees who now had good jobs with benefits and childcare support, at the local musicians who had a platform for their talents. "You mean like this?" "Exactly like this. One act of kindness led to all of this. It led to Frank Morrison changing his policies at Melody Diner. It led to dozens of jobs for good people. It led to a place where families can come together and feel welcomed." As if summoned by their conversation, Frank Morrison appeared in the restaurant's entrance, looking nervous but determined. Sarah hadn't seen him since their awkward phone conversation 3 months ago. "Frank?" Sarah said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," he said simply. "Not the corporate apology I gave you on the phone, but a real one. Sarah, I was wrong to fire you. I was so focused on rules and policies that I forgot about basic human decency." Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. "Thank you for saying that, Frank. It means a lot. I also wanted to tell you that things have changed at the diner. We now have a compassion policy. Employees are encouraged to use their judgment in helping customers who are genuinely in need. We call it the Sarah Mitchell Rule." Reba smiled at this unexpected development. "Frank, would you like to stay for dinner? Our chef makes an incredible pot roast." As Frank joined them for the meal, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. A simple act of kindness during a storm had transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Later that evening, as Sarah was closing up the restaurant, she found a note that had been left at the hostess station. "Dear Sarah, I was here tonight with my family for your opening. 3 months ago, I was going through a difficult divorce and was at my lowest point. I stopped by Melody Diner late one night, and you served me with such kindness and warmth that it restored my faith in people. I never told you how much that meant to me, but seeing what you've accomplished here, seeing how your kindness has grown into something that touches so many lives, I wanted you to know that you've been making a difference for years. Thank you for reminding us all that compassion is never wasted. A grateful customer." Sarah folded the note carefully and put it in her purse, knowing she would treasure it forever. As she turned off the lights and locked the door of Heartland Kitchen, she thought about the chain of kindness that had started with a simple gesture on a stormy night and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. Emma was waiting in the childcare room, having fallen asleep while working on a drawing. Sarah gently woke her daughter and helped gather her art supplies. "Mama," Emma said sleepily, "I love our new life." "So do I, sweetheart. So do I." As they drove home through the Nashville streets, Sarah thought about the lesson she would share with Emma someday. That kindness is never wasted. That small acts of compassion can create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. And that sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we receive, but from what we give freely to others. The storm that had brought her and Reba together had long since passed, but the warmth it had generated continued to touch lives, create opportunities, and remind everyone involved that in a world that often feels harsh and unforgiving, there are still people willing to offer comfort to strangers, pie to the hungry, and hope to those who need it most. And in the end, that might be the most important story of all.